Yes.
Well, joining us now is journalist and writer of the great post office scandal, Nick Wallis. Very good to talk to you, Nick. Loads of people, many people around the country were waiting to hear what Angela van der Bogerd had to say. She gave a sort of apology. It was a caveated apology. What did you think of it?
Yeah, I call them passive apologies. I'm sorry for this bad thing that happened to you. She didn't take any personal responsibility for anything which happened on her watch, which is fascinating, given that she was in the middle of implicating the entire post office in a cover-up, which started in 2013, when the post office board became aware there were serious problems with Horizon and potential miscarriages of justice, which had taken place over the first 13 years this century. Angela van der Bogerd held a line, which was that she wasn't aware that Fujitsu engineers could go into sub-postmasters accounts and fiddle around with them until 2019, despite being shown evidence that she received emails in 2010, 2011 and 2014 saying just that. She tried to excuse it by saying, I didn't join up the dots, or I didn't see the relevance of it at the time. Also, the bugs, errors and defects which caused so many of these branch discrepancies in Horizon accounts, she said, I only knew of 2. I wasn't aware that there were others that could affect branch accounts. She's in a pretty bind because she's given evidence to the High Court in the past. Yesterday was the 5th day of evidence that I've seen Angela van der Bogerd give on oath, because she gave evidence in the first 2 Bates versus Post Office trials. After the first trial, a High Court judge decided that she had deliberately attempted to mislead her, and her evidence in the second trial was found to be completely at odds with the facts, just advancing the post office's perspective. So she's got to be very, very careful here, and she seems to be veering towards explaining away her actions as that of someone who was incompetent. Because, of course, if she was deliberately withholding information which stopped sub-postmasters from getting timely access to the appeal courts, then she was literally perverting the course of justice, which is a criminal offence, something which is being investigated by the Metropolitan Police right now. So she's playing a very careful game, and it'll be very interesting to see what she says again at the inquiry today.
Yeah, I mean, a 35-year career with the Post Office. If she was a stick of Blackpool rock, she'd have Post Office running right the way throughout, wouldn't she, Nick? And so how much of a reliable witness, particularly given everything that you've just set out, can she really be?
Well, at the very first opening salvo yesterday, Jason Beer, Casey, who's the counsel to the inquiry, the barrister who asks questions on behalf of Sir Win Williams, who chairs the inquiry, he asked her about a statement in her witness statement to the inquiry where she said she was made redundant in 2020, and then points out that actually she wasn't made redundant. She had decided to leave the post office. He then said, was that because you were criticised by a High Court judge? You had been taken to the cleaners, essentially, by the sub-postmasters who you'd effectively fought against for the last 6 years. And she said, oh, no, it was because I was terribly upset with the slow speed at which the compensation schemes were being run. And you just thought, well, that just doesn't make any sense. Why are you trying to pretend that reality is different from the documents that are being put before you? So I have some difficulty taking at face value what she says on oath at the inquiry, because the High Court judge said he would not take what she said on face value unless it was backed up by documentary evidence when she was giving testimony at the High Court.
Earlier on this morning, we spoke to Albert Harwood, who is the solicitor representing many of the victims. He was telling us that actually this is very unedifying for the people implicated in this or who've been affected by this, and it's very hard for them to relive this and to hear what you're saying, a series of emails that weren't taken seriously. They knew, or we believe they knew, there were problems with the Horizon system. They knew, or we presume they knew, there was a backdoor into that. The Bramble report in 2017 as well. This is very hard on those victims.
Yes, and I do understand that the inquiry is trying to perhaps pursue a different avenue to that of the victims who just see these people dissembling on the stand. The inquiry is trying to do one of 2 things: provide evidence that these people were either professionally incapable, so they are, in the case of lawyers, perhaps going to be struck off. Also, they're doing a kind of pyramid. They are talking to people at low level, then senior level like Angela van der Bogerd, so that when it comes to boardroom level, who have legal responsibility for what happened at the post office. They have all the evidence and no wriggle room whatsoever. And some of the questioning yesterday of Angela van den Bogerd was less about Angela van den Bogerd and more about her boss, Paula Vennells. Why did Paula Vennells go and tell MPs that sub-postmasters get tempted by the public cash in their counter, and that they'd never lost a court case when it comes to Horizon, and Horizon had never been found responsible for branch errors? These were material untruths that Paula Vennells, the chief executive of the post office, was telling MPs. And so yesterday, what they were trying to explore was Angela van den Bogerd's responsibility for this. She, of course, denied all responsibility and said, oh, it was just Paula Vennells improvising on the briefing pack that they'd been given for this meeting. But there's a kind of pincer movement on the very, very top people at this, which is being laid out by the inquiry, so that when it comes to it, the board level executives at the post office have no escape. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens over the course of today, whether the inquiry is going to go for Angela van den Bogerd and her personal responsibility, or whether they're going to still carefully move towards Alice Perkins, who was the chair of the post office, or Paula Vennells, who gives evidence in May.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you when we're going to be hearing from Paula Vennells, because that is going to be an extremely significant moment, particularly for those sub-postmasters.
Yeah, it's going to be blockbuster. She gives evidence over 3 days, starting May the 22nd. I've already booked my place to be in the hearing room for that. I think it'll be standing room only, because there is a woman who has serious questions to answer. She's already been fingered by Alan Cook, who was a former boss of the post office, for signing off a £300,000 expenditure to go after sub-postmaster Lee Castleton in the High Court for a £26,000 debt. They were advised by a barrister that it was commercial madness to pursue this, and Alan Cook has said no, that was Paula Vennells who did that. And last week we heard from a lawyer who said that it was earlier this week, wasn't it? It's been such a long week. It was Chris Ojard, the general counsel of the post office, forgive me, who said that he recommended to the board that the post office stop prosecuting, because he felt very strongly that this was something the post office simply had no place to be doing. The person who resisted that, despite the executive committee unanimously agreeing it, was Paula Vennells. Paula Vennells wanted to keep on prosecuting sub-postmasters. So again, here is a woman who likes to present herself as caring and pious. She is a woman of the cloth, after all, but she also seems to be absolutely determined to nail sub-postmasters through the criminal and civil courts.